Alrighty, good morning, felicitations, salutations, and welcome to NycosRPG. This is another day in beautiful Southern California and beautiful Nycos. And we are looking at the world in around 80 days, a continuation of the series that I'm providing about how to create and support a fantasy setting of your very own. And today we're going to be talking about what I think may be one of the newest hot buttons of conversation, and that is to deal with the revolutionizing of the very concept of non-player characters. Today we're going to talk about how NPCs are perceived in the world of Nycos and some possible ways to think about NPCs that you may not have considered before. But before we get started, make sure that you like and subscribe to this show so that we can keep providing this material to you on a daily basis. I definitely want to help every game master become the best they can be. So today we're going to be talking about non-player characters. And I have to say that one of the most challenging portions of being a storyteller is finding ways to specifically carry forward the story in terms of the individuals that are not the players that are engaged in the story. Most of us are used to the idea of relating to our environment, but very few of us really consider what the ramifications of other people are in the adventure world. The most common tropes now are that NPCs really don't exist, that they're literally standing around in the world waiting to be engaged with. That's their sole purpose. And I think that's really a danger in terms of how we interact with individuals in life and in story when we automatically discount them or consider them to be somehow different from us, or even, shall I say, less than us, even if we don't go so far as to point out the differences. If we interact in such a way, I think we do ourselves and them a disservice. So today we're going to be covering it from a slightly different perspective. And that is, as a storyteller and as a game master, you have really one of really two or three choices to do, concerning the persona, the individuals that are in the story that are not your primary concerns. In the case of narrative, quite often you can categorize a massive proportion of the non-player entities, the non-essential entities in your campaign as window dressing. You can simply put them in the category of descriptors, and certainly you include that in the description of a location, of an environment, of the community in which the action is occurring. But fundamentally, they are literally just that. They are part of the scenery, and they are not integral to the story. And to me, this is kind of like utilizing a series of paintbrushes to paint the scene. If I am describing a situation and I need to use other beings in the scene, if they are beings that I don't perceive of the players interacting with, I will use what a friend of mine has got me now thinking of as the magic of hand wavium, the idea that we can just dispense with the broader details of the individual and only describe them in terms of what they physically look like and where they are in the scene, and we can then dispense with it. And then I got to thinking, when we're talking about a role-playing game, every persona, every sentient being, every talking tree, whatever it is that has the ability to interact with the players, needs to be considered in a much more broad term. So let's go through each of these in terms of their utility. Yes, we can talk about some as window dressing. We can talk about the story being told. We can talk about the location and such. But we really want to talk about what an NPC is. So, starting from the get-go, a non-player character is any persona who is not being represented by a player. That's everybody else. In other words, that is the cast of thousands. That is one of the roles of a game master, is to be the personality, be the voice of all of these countless individuals that walk through scenes day after day that are not effectively essential to the story other than in terms of theming and flavor. And so therefore the question becomes, what do we do as a game master to define this window dressing? Well, I have developed a mechanism that I think really works well, and I would recommend for you, and that is the idea to consider what the role is of that persona in the scene. So literally, are they a piece of scenery that's going to vanish when we start talking about something else, or we focus in on the details of an encounter? Are they something that will be an obstacle in the near or far future of the scene? And do they have any requirement to have anything other than appearance? And in most cases, then what now people call the NPC. I've gone away from using the term NPC because it's gotten such a dark reputation as being a soulless entity just waiting for interaction, so that I actually consider these this first stage of persona to actually be, as I've said, window dressing. I'm describing a scene, so I'm describing the kinds of individuals that are on the street. I'm talking about the, what the players are perceiving in terms of, is it a populated place? Is it a desolate place? Is it a social place? And by giving a description to these window dressing persona, I'm just simply giving kind of a narrative description and making it obvious that these are not expected to be people that you would interact with. We don't walk down the street saying hello to every human being that we pass. That in some circles that might be odd or weird, but since we don't do that, then it's kind of essential that we can emulate that in a role-play game. And because we are having to deal with so many personalities, there's no point in writing out the motivations, personality quirks, identity issues of the window dressing. We just don't. So a couple of words of description. I generally use an adjective and an adverb to make it feel more alive. So phrases like cautiously optimistic or radically flamboyant give us a clear picture of that persona without having to give any details. And the window dressing really deserves no more than that, because the window dressing is not playing a integral part of the scene. Now, I do have to qualify that, because there are times when the window dressing pieces are essential. If you are role-playing out an interaction between the super spy about to catch the known terrorist in a certain block range of a city, certainly we need the window dressing to be recognizable, relatable, understandable, so that our esteemed hero in the scene will react accordingly rather than callously in reference to the potential actions of our villain, our terrorist in the scene. So there is an importance that we give life to the window dressing, but don't make it so focused and drawn to that the players and the story elements get lost chasing the identity of these NPCs. So with the window dressing, I also, by the way, I need to say, I have gone to not calling them NPCs at all. Generally, I refer to them as non-enjoined persons, because in the world of Nikos and in the concept of NycosRPG, when you build your persona, you are something special in the world, and the world somehow can feel that, recognize it, and therefore interact with it in a new way. And so, by recognizing that your window dressing are NEPs, that just simply means that they're not going to need to worry about personality attributes, any of that. You just need a description and go. The ramifications of window dressing is they are generally, by and large, the victims when something egregious happens. When the giant machine falls out of the sky, it's going to destroy blocks, and therefore the window dressing personnel are going to be those that are laying under the rubble and screaming out for assistance. They're the persons who are not of importance, but may be important to the story. And by sculpting and scooping the window dressing into a separate category, it makes it easier to resolve in terms of how the players need to react to them. I mean, certainly in the case of this described scene, they would be compassionate, they would be endeavoring to extract the window dressing from the dangers, but they're not intended to find out, what the person's name is, where they live, that kind of thing. It's just simply not in the cards for the window dressing to ever have that kind of meaning. Secondarily to that, and I'm putting this in numerical order, but there's no real priority for them. The idea of moving beyond the window dressing is just to say that once we establish that the majority of persona that a player character, a enjoined person might engage with, the number of these non-player characters that are essential to the story drops off radically. And the next most critical of these would be the recurring persona. And while it would seem that if they are recurring, they must be, important, they don't necessarily have to be. For example, if Jimmy is your barber and you go to see the barber once a month, yes, you know a little bit about Jimmy, and you might share some information with Jimmy from time to time, but he's not necessarily somebody with whom you have a deep and abiding relationship with. Therefore, you only need to know some information about the recurring persona. The advantage of this is that you become associated with them and they do become more integral. We will be talking a little bit later about how this mechanism works, but just realize that when we're talking about a non-enjoined person who the players react to on an ongoing basis, these recurring persona will need some depth. You'll need to put some idea of how friendly they are, how accepting they are, how generous and tolerant they are, and this kind of thing, because the players need to be able to push against the recurring persona if it comes down to it, with information and with perhaps advice. And to do this, you have to feel the identity. And as I said, we'll go into the actual mechanics of how that works in a moment. But I'm just clarifying that the recurring persona, there's much more of a build to them, in that you need to have an idea of how tenacious they are, how willing they are to accept risk, how brave they are, and these kind of things in terms of how they interact with the personas of your adventure group. The next beyond that, and arguably the most intense, will be those persona that are important to your story. This would be your informants, your individuals who share information with the players. Perhaps they are the ones who hire them for the occupational jobs that you send them on. Perhaps it's their handler if they're on an ongoing campaign. Perhaps that persona is somebody who shows up from time to time to give them additional information. And because they are a storied persona, they will have considerably more substance. They're not simply going to be a piece of window dressing that passes by and informs. They have to have some kind of intensity or depth, and so therefore they will be more developed. And with each of these subsequent levels of non-enjoined persons, we are building up towards the closest we're going to get to an enjoined person for the game master will be those that are the foils and echoes of your campaign. And I utilize the term foils and echoes to refer to both those who are challenging the players and those that are encouraging the players. Foils are those who, in essence, become the devil's advocate and give opposing opinions or opposing thought processes to allow the players to build up and defend their position, or conversely, to encourage their activity, support the decision they've already made, and become fans of the heroes, so to speak. And these foils and echoes are going to be the most developed of the persona that you're going to have for your NEPs. The NEP, in replacing the NPC, is simply putting a living, breathing, and an existent persona on the screen instead of a walking cardboard cutout. In this case, even the window dressing has more to it than that, because you've given them a bit of animation, a bit of flavor and personability right in the description, so that the players have something to push off of if they wanted to. And therefore, I'm thinking, for example, of the woman in red described in The Matrix. The idea of, yes, the simulation includes all these personalities that you're walking by that you'll never interact with again, faceless, nameless strangers on the street. But then that woman in red walks by, and that woman in red is window dressing. She is alluringly innocent. Whatever terminology you want to use, you're drawn to that window dressing, and there's a reason for that. It allows the players the agency to decide truly whom they want to interact with and whom they want to ignore. But by giving them more depth, you're making them living beings. This is still a thriving living world we're talking about in terms of everybody that's not your personas, your player characters. So let's talk a little bit about how that might work. But before we get there, I do want to take a minute and remind you to check out NycosRPG.com if you want all the information on the currently available Nycos product. There are a couple of projects to look at, which would be the Dark Shards pre-release edition and also the enhanced edition, both of which are available from NycosRPG. All right, moving on. So I want to talk about, not utility, I'm ahead of myself. We're going to talk about the essence of interaction. Interaction is merely the experiential connection between the players of your world, the other individuals at the table, and the personas of your world, which are the NEPs we're talking about. And the NPC is being revolutionized by the world of Nycos by lifting them off the page and breathing life into them. They are a part of the world, and there needs to be an understanding of the very process of interaction. When a player character is in a scene, he's there to gather information. Maybe he has a physical objective of defeating an enemy. Maybe he has a objective of gathering physical items from the scene or whatever. The idea of that interaction being essential to the players means that you need to provide that information to them in some fashion. Most commonly, narrative. You simply can describe the scene and describe what they see, but that tends to be flat. There's no engagement by the players in that interaction. They're literally sitting in front of a camera, and they might as well be looking at a photograph, because your description is just that, the outline of what is in the room. When you add the next dynamic, which is interaction between the persona and its environment, now you're adding to it the interest of the players and drawing them into that process. There's several ways to do this, as I said. Narrative description, question and answer, call and response. All of these are ways of getting information to the personas about the world they're in. But by far the more powerful of them is communication. If an individual is talking with other individuals in the scene, then they have they're not only engaging their discernment and intellectual interaction, but they're also working on their communication skills, their ability to convey information, and, as the saying would go, give as much as they get, so to speak. When that is the case, therefore, when they are communicating, though, they're now engaging differently. They're engaging with different parts of their brains. Not only are they responding with their auditory nerves, but now with their reasoning processes and conceptualization mechanisms. And therefore, you have to look at what it is you are utilizing this communication for. One way of dealing with that would be acknowledgement. You are validating the non-player, the persona in the world, and giving them a recognition for existing. And that's huge. If we look at it just simply from the reasons why people role play, we've talked several times about the fact that a person can role play simply because they want to know what the rules are and what the world is, and that they have an actual existence in that world and what that actually means. And by acknowledging them, by actually conversing with them and speaking not with the actual player, but speaking with the persona in game, you're providing that player with acknowledgement of the existence in the real. And that acknowledgement is a really powerful tool. It now cements them into the parameters of that reality. I think it's really fun when you've got a brand new player and you've given them a description and you've given them the ability to pick up equipment and to understand, how physics works and all of that. When you push them directly into their first interaction with the personas of the world, it's fun to watch just how the lights go on, because all of a sudden they're realizing that they're on the stage. They are in front of another person, and the world is actually interacting with them. So acknowledgement is a huge reason for this communication, because first of all, it gives the players an establishment of the facts of the scene. It also gives them a chance to evaluate the scene. In other words, hey buddy, I see you on this corner. What do you know that goes on in this area? Is this, can I trust you? Can I trust this scene? Is there something I don't know about? By giving them the ability to start evaluating, then the player's interaction becomes more directly connected. And that is really essential. An evaluated, I remember that one of the phrases that Socrates is known for is the unexamined life is not worth living. The idea of an evaluation means you are being examined, you're being considered, you're being sized up, and all of those things are the things that happen in real life. And so by being able to bring that into this scene and put the players into that interaction with the non-enjoined person, you're giving them the opportunity now to do in reverse, assess and evaluate the person that they're speaking with, the scene they're in, and how they came to be there, where that person has come from, and so on. And all of those portions of communication dealing with evaluation eventually guide to interest, because you want the players to be engaged. The non-player character, as currently defined, is too flat. He's a piece of the scenery. He is a chunk of window dressing that is only there to dispense information. It's the old push the button, get the bacon. If I set my NPCs, my non-enjoined persons in Nycos, if I put the non-enjoined person in that scene, what's he doing there? Why is he wanting to share that information? What would make him trust this person? Now, we've established that the enjoined are seen as being champions and worthy of conversation, but that only applies if you're forthright and are being, quote, a good guy. The enjoined person is a threat to criminals and villains everywhere, and so why is this individual being willing to share information? Why is this NEP even in the scene? These triggers, these hooks, will bring a level of interest from your players, which is the healthy and greatly desired portion of it. Also realize that an NEP in a scene, a non-player character with this newer definition, has opportunities. Perhaps they are going to be more coy. Perhaps they are going to try to see if there's additional quid pro quo they can get from the scene, because after all, they're living beings. If the persona have let on, if the players in the group have let on that they have more wealth than what they're offering, maybe the NEP pushes back. Maybe the NEP digs a little further and tries to become a more connected person with this adventure group. These opportunities only are afforded when you're truly talking about communication instead of a flat dispensement of information. And then finally, understanding is absolutely critical. When you have a non-enjoined person in a scene and a gunfight breaks out, care and concern for other individuals is not as likely to occur for a cardboard cutout than it is for another living being. And so the understanding that your non-enjoined persons do have lives, do other things other than stand on street corners dispensing information, means that the players will react to their existence in the scene at a deeper level, and therefore will create an environment where the personas become more, and therefore the personas of the players will become more as they engage with these beings. Now, if you notice my quote here, this is by Augmandino, and it's only the first part of the quote. It says, "Beginning today, treat everyone you meet as if they're going to be dead by midnight." The reality is that when we meet individuals on the street or in the course of our lives, we will more than likely never see them again. The world is too big and the expanse is too wide for us to be able to become concerned about every individual. The reason why the NEPs can become window dressing is that we walk right by them every day. We are in the vicinity of human beings pretty much with every breath. And if we don't have this mindset that this is our one chance to influence, we won't take the effort. We won't make the effort to do so. And if you can begin to perceive of communication, even in a role-playing game, at this level of intensity, saying, oh my gosh, I will never see that person on the block again. So if they're attractive, I am going to let them know that I appreciate it. If I'm going to be a part of this world, I'm going to engage with it. This means that we're communicating in all that we do, and it brings about a vibrancy that you don't see in other concepts of role play, and you don't see in anywhere in the real world for the most part. But there's a secondary part to communication, and that is the idea of utility. There are things that have to happen in a story that require activity to occur. We have to look at our interactions and see them for what we can get from them. Just as in the case of the two-dimensional flat NPCs, we do want to gather information from them. But there are ways we can gather that information that don't necessarily require directly the verbal communication. Perhaps we can see in their actions, if they are hurried, concerned, worried, looking over their shoulders, their actions will speak for them as well. Perhaps if you are building an NEP, you want to consider what their emotional state is at the point when they are talking. Are they rushed? Are they looking for their payment because they need it because they've got a bill collector after them? What information do they really have? Is it actual actionable information? And if so, why do they have it? How did they come to know it? And why are they willing to share it? The idea of looking into the mind of your NEP adds a level of depth that you won't find in regular roleplay games. It's only through the Nykos mechanism where you see these non-enjoined persons as having their own existence, their own life, their own reality. The next thing is to look at their orientation. Now, I'm not talking necessarily about their proclivities. I know that that's a big buzzword in our world today, to worry about someone's orientation. But in this case, it's what do they mean to the story? Did they find this information by pure chance? Or did they get the information as a payoff for something else? Are they part of a cabal? Is it a situation where they are hoping to capture the persona in a trap? There's all kinds of things that can come into the orientation of the group, or the orientation of the NEP. And again, this revelation that the individuals you meet on the street have their own lives plays into their orientation. Are they in a hurry? Do they have time to talk? Are they willing to engage, or are they terrified of engagement? There's all kinds of things. And then finally, how important and how quickly do they want to get this information off their chest? Is there an urgency about them? If so, is it a safe urgency, or is there danger inherent in what they're about to tell you? Is it a matter of essential information, or is it just they're in a hurry? All of these terms tend to show that there is a utility of action that a persona would have, who is a non-character. He's not a essential piece of the adventure, and yet his role in this specific scene has elevated him to that level. I go on with the next part of the quote here from Augmandino. Extend to them, the individuals that you meet, that you're considering to be dead by midnight. Extend to them all the care, kindness, and understanding you can muster, and do so with no thought of any reward. When we meet people, if we really consider and are compassionate with them, and we act as if this is the last time we will ever see them, we can afford them more interaction, more openness, and more identity connection with them than we might otherwise. The rest of the final portion of the quote by Augmandino is that do this and your life will never be the same again. The reality is that if we treat people with the level of depth and sincerity we would have for someone who is on their deathbed, we will be better connected, more associated, and gain more benefit from the connection that we have with individuals. Granted, it's a difficult thing to do. We don't necessarily have time, and that's the reason why NPCs were formed as a way to gather information and disseminate it quicker without having to do all of the longhand of direct communication. But I think we've kind of dropped the ball, because I think that when you come down to it, the essential that players need to recognize is that NPCs are still PCs. They are not being played by a player, but they still have a personality. They still have a being, they have a purpose, and they have lives. And when you look at your non-enjoined personnel as important to your story, important to the recurrence of the encounters that the players have. When you accept that the world is bigger and that the people you're populating your world with actually have lives, you will be elevating the player experience as well, because you're giving more relevance to the no longer flat NEPs in your world. Alrighty, we are at the end of the show. I know that we normally go about 30-35 minutes, but I want to take some time here at the end to thank you for your participation. If you did get a chance to see the plea for action that I put out a couple days ago, that's still ongoing. If you want to become part of our community and assist our players, we have a situation with a member of our community who is considerably aged, and right now she's driving 55 miles one way to be a part of our games community, and I wanted to offer her some other alternatives. So join with our community, become a player in our Saturday and Sunday groups through patreon.com/Nykos. And for more information about the property, do check out NycosRPG.com. Subscribe to this channel and like it if you're enjoying the content. If you don't, make sure you leave a comment so I know how to make changes and my focus, so that you will appreciate the show more. Until next time, I'm Jonathan Albin. This is NycosRPG. We will be here tonight at 11 p.m. as we are Monday through Friday. And we also are here at 10 a.m. in the morning, also Monday through Friday. And we will see you next time. Have a great day.